This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 94. Jamie Alberico. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 94 of Experts in the Wire. Jamie, you like my introduction?
I love the introduction.
Why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Yeah, that just happened spontaneously the very first time I was trying to record my first episode, so I decided to leave it in there. But I'm very excited to have you on the line with us today. We're going to chat all about crawling, large site architecture, working as an in-house SEO, and lots more. And also, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my sponsor, BuzzSumo, and you're going to learn how you can save 30% off 3 months of BuzzSumo a little bit later on in the show. It's a great deal. But first, Jamie, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. We're going to chat about a lot about large site architecture and arrow.com, which is the company you work for. But first, I want to ask you, I see a lot of different stops in your journey along the way to becoming a technical SEO. You were doing CRO at Moz for a little while, consumer analyst at MapQuest. Where along this path did you first get into technical SEO?
I became a technical SEO out of necessity. So a couple of months into my first in-house e-commerce job, my top level keywords, the things we really cared about, the ones the CEO had written down on his whiteboard, were hemorrhaging out, dropped 23 spots in a matter of a week.
Wow.
We looked at the site index, it's losing 40,000 pages a week. Something in the site is very, very sick.
Yeah.
So this became my first, all right, we've got to find a solution. We've got to save this. We've got to figure out what's going on. And, dug into it, found out that the back-end tools designed to control indexing weren't working as expected. And it was this weird little checkbox from merchandising team that said, is active. And that controlled how many filters on a category page were indexed. So if we had a category of pants, blue short corduroy pants with buttons, all those combinations were being indexed.
Yeah.
There was a lot of duplicative content. Had to come up with a very quick solution, worked with the CTO basically to break the site's spine. We had to recorrect that index. And then I got to work with dev teams to build new tools and re-architect, and I was in love with it.
Isn't it crazy how one little thing can cause such huge damage on a site? Like one misplaced character in a robots.txt file, it can break the entire thing. I'm curious, how did you really learn? So for me, I learned just by doing it, right? I got clients and I'm learning, and it's this iterative process. Did you, follow any resources? Was it learning sort of as you were going? How did you learn what you know about technical SEO?
I learned boots on the ground. You don't really understand a challenge or a concept until it's applicable in your life. So every day is a new way of looking at any problem that's come up, meeting new team members and resources that can help me learn things. Lately, I've been getting a lot more into DevOps and working with CDNs, really fun technology that's not in the normal scope of just being an in-house SEO.
Were there any resources that you've used along the way to help with tools or anything? Like for me, I might Google a Screaming Frog tutorial, and Seer Interactive has a great one, for example. Were there any sites or anything that come to mind where, that kind of helped you learn some of these tools and getting into the weeds and the details of them?
Absolutely. I spend a lot of time in the forums. So Google Webmaster Forum has top contributors who can help answer questions. The Twitter community is fantastic.
Yeah.
SEOs are really chatty. We elevate each other, and that's a wonderful community to be a part of. Moz definitely cut my teeth in SEO from that beginner's guide that they provided.
It's a great community. So let's chat a little bit about Arrow, because to put this in context, we're going to talk a lot about large site SEO, crawling, a lot of technical stuff. And the site you work with, arrow.com, when I look at SEMrush, just for context, it has over 100,000 visits a month, according to SEMrush from Google. Can you describe Arrow? What does Arrow sell? It's kind of a cool product, at least for me. And then who are your customers? So what do you sell, and who are the customers for arrow.com?
So Arrow Electronics is an electronics component distributor. So in your studio right now, there are probably a dozen products from Arrows. We're talking diodes, transistors, all these tiny little pieces that make so much of the technology around us. So the majority of the site is going to focus on B2B companies who produce things like your microphone, your lighting systems, all of those. And then we have the smaller audience that is our maker community. So the next evolution of creators coming out there. Sphero started their project with they do that really cool BB-8 toy that you can control with your phone. And they started with a partnership between Aero Electronics and Indiegogo. So
That's
it's about fostering the next generation and working with those out there already.
And is the site do you do lots of high volume, low transaction value transactions, or is it more like people making like a big giant purchase? Is it high volume or low volume? What's sort of the divide there?
I would say 80% of transactions are going to be lower, small volumes. And then we have the big sales that come through where someone needs 5 million of this transistor. Yeah.
And you mentioned on Twitter, the way I found you actually, which we'll talk about later, about how many different products and SKU numbers are there. Can you give us that ballpark? This is insane.
So right now we have about 4 million. We actually just culled about 2 million back.
Yeah. Wow. And already I have a lot of questions, but I'm trying to hold back and save them because I have some questions here from Twitter as well. So we'll get to those. And then just to set up the further context about how you're working with Arrow, do you work on a team? Are there separate teams? Like, how is that all set up within Arrow? Or do you have a little team of your own and then you interact with other teams? How does that work?
Yes, I have a wonderful dev team that I'm embedded with, and I spend a lot of time cooperating with different teams. So on my team, I've got 4 developers, a CMS architect, a QA, a product owner, and a very patient Scrum Master. I love you, Chelsea, if you're listening to this. Yeah. I work with our DevOps teams, APIs, marketing, product database, UX, analytics, and automation as well, and that's a pretty consistent cadence.
What's the name of your team?
We are Steamboat.
Steamboat.
Every team at Arrow is named after a ski resort. We're here in Colorado.
And is it a technical SEO team or is it a dev team, or how do you what's the layman's categorization of it?
It is a dev team dedicated to performance and SEO.
Perfect. I'm hearing a lot of teams named similar to that at big companies like this. So I want to chat a little bit about working in-house before we get to a lot of the deeper technical stuff. And actually want to start with a question from Twitter, from Jeremy Rivera. He wants to know, how do you prioritize your SEO tasks? So how do you prioritize when you discover these issues across the technical SEO spectrum?
That is a great question. So when you are working with performance and SEO, you are working with what is live on the site, what is happening right now out there in the wild. So issues affecting production are going to trump all of your good intentions. If you've got a call for pricing that's returning a 403 for some reason, that needs to be addressed before you can go ahead and add this new piece of structured data markup. So is ultimately,
is it more prioritization based upon, it sounds like, technical things, like where it is in the technical queue? When I think of a lot of how I prioritize, for example, when I'm working with clients, because it's not always this big of a scale, it's prioritized based upon maybe marketing opportunity or traffic or rankings or something like that. This sounds a little bit more like it's sort of a technical queue sort of prioritization. Is that fair to say? Is that accurate?
We have to balance. So there's a team that is the counterpart to mine, that is our content SEO team. And if our dev work can give that team the leverage to optimize content or meet a new search intent, it's my job to advocate and groom and get that together so they can bring in that traffic. It's a little bit like teaching a man to fish, but we're building another team a fishing boat. Yeah,
I like that analogy, by the way. So how do you sort of deal with balancing that? Like, in terms of, because you have those two sides to try to help satisfy, right? So I'm just curious how you sort of work through those prioritizations and make those decisions.
So we look at the size of the project. We look at what is the effort required to do it, what is the risk of not doing it, and add those pieces together. So we're trying to weight it in a way that gives us the most effective next task for the team to execute.
I like that. I like that sort of like, what's the effect what's the risk of not doing it? That's something a lot of people don't think about actually. Do you have like do you work this through in a spreadsheet, or is there a certain tool where you sort of queue up all your tasks and prioritize them?
We are a Jira team, so we use Jira to go ahead and create our tickets, add all our acceptance criteria, our points, labeling it for what it relates to, keeping in queue dependencies, deadlines.
Yeah, I use Google Docs. So internal communication, you touched upon this a little bit. You talk to different departments. How do you manage sort of delegating tasks, project management? How do you sort of manage that stuff working with different teams?
I ask dumb questions and I ask for more words. When I say title, that might not mean the same thing to a merchandiser. So being on the same vocabulary, being a tech SEO and pivoting a lot between teams, you've got to have that codex of what this word means to this team and keep that in mind. And when communicating, we whiteboard out complex ideas. I get a lot of cardio making laps around the office. I found the best way to handle delegation is sending out action items after meetings. People bring up great ideas. They bring up critical blockers, and sometimes we forget about them because we're human. Or asking the PM, hey, I was just in this meeting where we were collaborating for this initiative, this launch. What were the items you needed from me?
Right. One thing I've noticed so I'm an outside consultant, I work obviously with clients, and I get to observe a lot of different internal teams. And one sticking point I often see is when there's too many layers of communication between the different teams and the different people. Do you have a way at Arrow to mitigate that? Do you try to minimize those layers of communication, minimize those levels of let's call it management, or how do you deal with those sort of friction points within Arrow?
I feel like this team is really good in communicating. I have great relationships with members on each team. And I think a lot of it is having those allies, people who have the same objective as you. They have the same goals. Ultimately, we all want a site that works better. And where those layers of communication become troublesome is when it's the how to achieve it. And perhaps the translation between the levels. So everyone's been in a scenario where someone with a very fancy title has given a directive. Yeah, that directive was not very explicit. So the teams involved in it interpret it in different ways.
Right.
So having that one person on that team so you can go, hey, I have a dependency with this ticket for your work. Can we touch base real quick and talk about that? Those allies all across the company are ultimately will make you successful when you need to pivot and work with so many groups.
Kyle Faber on Twitter. Thanks for asking a question, Kyle, by the way. I know you always interact with me and ask questions, so I appreciate that. He wants to know, do you work with optimizing for keywords? For example, keyword optimization, rank tracking, or maybe that's not a part of your team. But if so, how do you handle the handoff and management of the research and recommendations with content and marketing teams for keywords and keyword research?
That is a great question, Kyle. Thank you. So as a tech SEO, I'm going to focus on how Google crawls, renders, and indexes. When it comes to ranking, that beautiful complex beast with 2,000 factors in an algorithm, we have a wonderful content team in-house that handles that. So it's collaboration between them. Has my team made the page the concept that they want to rank for a viable landing page? If not, how do we fix that? If so, how do we empower them to put the pieces in place there so it provides a thorough answer to a user's intent?
As an in-house SEO, what metrics and technical SEO, what metrics are you held accountable for? I imagine it's not traffic per se, right? So what metrics are you looking at as a technical SEO?
As a technical SEO, I am looking at how Googlebot crawls the site. Are they getting a healthy bandwidth to it? Are they able to get all of the content they need? What is being indexed that shouldn't be? Where are we wasting that crawl budget? I focus on troubleshooting and monitoring. So one of the things we're really moving towards with such a large company is how do we create automation? Where can we take human bandwidth, these really creative people who have great ideas on how to move forward and move them from doing repetitive tasks that are required to have this ecosystem sustained to there's automation in place. We no longer have to wait till someone notices something strange. We have an alert that lets us know, and we can move on that one.
Is it like alert of like maybe over indexation or something? Is that like an automation alert? A good example?
That would be a good example, yeah. Sudden fluctuation in our index status, Googlebot receiving 403s from a bot mitigation service. That's an alert we can set up and put in place. It does happen, by the way, guys. Bot mitigation services have a whitelist and they have triggers, but those triggers don't allow anything even if it's whitelisted. So if suddenly Googlebot is really happy and crawling your site too much, they might start getting 403'd, putting over in the penalty box.
Is a bot mitigation service, so for example, I had a client, I analyzed their log files and I saw, oh my goodness, look at all these spoofed Googlebots IP addresses that are crawling the site. I said, you need to block these. Is a bot mitigation service a company that does that for you?
Exactly. So they're going to run that host name check and make sure that IP is actually Googlebot and keep bot traffic from degrading the performance of the site for users.
So this is actually something I know sort of deep down it's the right thing to do, but maybe you can help give me some confirmation here. It sounds like I'm doing the right thing, right? Because I'm trying to optimize for only the bots that should be crawling the site to be able to crawl the site.
Absolutely. You've got greedy resources out there that want to go ahead and take your content. Perhaps they're scraping it for pricing, trying to get comparisons, everything else. It is not your job as a website to go ahead and let someone else copy off your work.
Right.
You want a site that works for users.
So that's what some of these scrapers may be doing, actually, is gathering intelligence. I didn't even think of that. Because some of them were like spoofing Googlebot, and that's all it said. And actually went to a website where you could enter the IP and see other complaints about that IP. But I was doing that all manually. So it sounds like this service is maybe something I should recommend to my clients.
Absolutely. But when you put it up live, you need to have your tech SEO eyes on, because if it has a threshold of you can only make so many calls simultaneously, well, that CSS was too many calls. So that got blocked. Well, now you have a page loaded without CSS.
Right.
So it's never out of the box. You have to be there configuring it to how your site works, acts, and interacts with users.
And speaking of the automation, just getting back to that, is there a certain tool, like how are you setting up the automation? Are you building something internally or using a tool, or how does that work?
We have an amazing automation engineer who works with many teams, but she works with ours in helping get these components set in place. And she uses, I believe, we have a Team City run that's at Selenium. So that allows them to do like a click path interaction to it.
Oh, wow. That sounds great. In terms of metrics as well, Robin on Twitter wants to know, she's curious how other technical folks estimate the impacts of technical changes, such as improving crawl efficiency, indexing, canonical tags, all these things. Do you tie it to revenue, or are you tying it more closely to technical metrics? How does that work for you?
So there's a primary result, a primary goal, and then there's secondary goals. And in the case of technical changes, usually the primary KPI there is going to be a technical metric. So fixing canonicals is a really good example. We had set them so they reflected any parameter on that URL. If every copy is the master copy, no copy is the master copy, and Google will choose one. That does not mean that they will choose in your favor. So in this scenario, fixing canonicals meant consolidating versions of the asset. One version is one strong version and more likely to rank. That means more organic landing pages. More landing pages means more revenue.
And are you looking at, is Googlebot or all bots crawling that one canonical more versus crawling the variety of them? What's the actual metric when you're consolidating pages? Is it just traffic to that page, or what's the metric?
We track the number of viable landing pages. The hypothesis being, if they were consolidated, that one page is now stronger and can rank. So if the number of landing pages went up, we had more of them that had been recognized between all the versions, across all those versions, and had the authority associated with them.
Okay. What is a viable landing page? Is that, are you saying you're looking at how many actual pages were landed on in a given time period, and out of those, which ones are important, or the primary page? What is that metric exactly?
A viable landing page is it indexed and is Google sending traffic to it? Okay,
so if this number goes up, is that good or bad? Because if the number goes up, is maybe more landing pages not the pages you want?
It's going to depend on your situation. So in this one, we had split the authority of that one page across all of these self-canonical versions.
Right.
So instead of having one superhero page, we had a bunch of tiny little ones that really couldn't do their job very well.
Yeah.
Put them together. We've got one superhero page back, all of the links, all of the authority interactions with those in one place.
Right.
It's stronger. It can now rank. Did it rank? Yes. Did it bring in traffic? Awesome. We're looking for an increase in the number of landing pages.
So if that's 10 going to 1, that should be one viable landing page that you're getting versus 10. It should go down in that case.
Well, those ones weren't viable. They were so diluted.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
You're trying to consolidate to 1, so you get a landing page of 1. And do you ever do anything to tie this to revenue or traffic? Or is it you're doing these technical things, you increase the authority and the ranking of a page because of technical reasons? Are you able to tie that to revenue or traffic or any sort of marketing metric like that?
Absolutely. We tie them together. That's going to be the secondary KPIs here, that the secondary goals. Our first one was, okay, we made it up. We took all these versions that weren't working and made one strong landing page. That landing page is now viable. It's bringing in traffic. It's bringing in users. Did we see an increase in revenue? Did we see an increase in the number of transactions, the number of orders? One thing I think I would like to see for a company is more analysts. So having a really strong analytics team in-house to pass this off to is the ideal situation.
How do you know when, or maybe you don't, or like I guess most of the time, but how do we know as SEOs that a page improving was not due to something else? Like, sure, I can consolidate these pages, but maybe the algorithm changed at the same time, or, how do you have ways of trying to rule out those other factors?
You're never going to have a closed system in our world.
Yeah.
There's 2,000 factors in there. They're updated daily. But what you can do is
you can be as close as possible, right? I mean, and I think we know as SEOs when deep down, right? Like if it changed.
There's a certain spidey sense. You can look at an index and go, something is not right here. And I think you learn that bit. And I would love to be able to go ahead and make case studies of all these pieces. That would be absolutely great.
Because I'm asking a little for myself as an SEO, but for the other SEOs listening, because I think oftentimes one thing we all struggle with is what you just said. It's not a closed system. So some people look at the SEO, and I get this question all the time from clients. Well, can you prove that you did this change and then this thing happened? And it's kind of like, if I'm being honest, sure, maybe, but maybe not, right? And I think I ask you for my own sort of validation as well, but for the listeners out there too, to know that this sort of SEO testing, especially from a technical standpoint and consolidation, et cetera, you can't really know 100% if that helped, because there are all these other factors as well. One last thing I want to ask about is in your notes here, you say good statistical models require good scrubbed data. And so can you break that apart a little bit? Why is this important? And then how do you come up with scrubbed, clean data?
So if we want to look at how the page performance was impacted by going ahead and consolidating, changing the canonical to only reflect the true URL without parameters, we need to have the Google Analytics data for all versions with all parameters. We then need to go ahead and measure how many sessions they were getting uniquely versus how many sessions they got once we consolidated them together. So we have to know all of those variations. We have to scrub down, consolidate them, do the math. When we had 6 versions of this page, each of them got 3 sessions apiece. Now that we have one version of the page, that got 25 sessions.
Yeah.
But this requires in-depth analysis. And when you're working on a production run team, a lot of the times you need to move to the next task because things move quickly.
Yes. One last question before we chat about architecture. Speaking of like working with other teams, so one thing that I know some SEOs struggle with is communicating with developers, especially if you're not as technically inclined. Do you have any tips? And you're laughing, so there's something maybe a little funny coming up. Do you have any tips for SEOs to help communicate and make the dev's job easier?
Absolutely. There was a fantastic panel at Tech SEO Boost where a group, I believe they were from Airbnb. The devs came up and they answered questions, and their candor was hilarious. So let's start here. If the developers you're working with are direct and short, do not take it personally. Devs genuinely want to give you what you ask for. Coding is very literal, and it plays out in the way developers interact. So when writing code, pretend you have a little robot. You can't tell that little robot, turn right. Turn right one pace. You have to tell it to turn at 90 degrees and then take one step forward. There's a quite literal
you got to break down the steps.
Yes. So when talking to development teams, be very specific. Use user stories. As blank, I want to blank in order to blank. So as my role, as this user impacted, I want to do this thing, and this will be my outcome. This user story is also a great way of helping you keep track of what is that KPI you're looking for with this ticket. Give them acceptance criteria. It must do X, Y, and Z. And test cases. You probably will be working with QAs who are reviewing your code before it goes out into production. If they know what to look for, they're more likely to catch when it's not doing what you expect. So if this happens, then this should happen.
Yeah. And
this could be multiple states.
This is like the hidden reason why it's good for SEOs to learn a little bit about development. Not only to literally know how to maybe edit JavaScript or something, but to think how a developer thinks, which you illustrated perfectly. If I go to a developer as more of a right brain, sort of like in the clouds marketer, right? That's not going to help them. And it's just, it's going to create friction. So that's sort of like, if this, then that. I mean, it's literally comes from development. So I think that's a really, really important tip. So let's chat a little bit about site architecture. Arrow.com, as we talked about, is a large site. You said there's like 4 million products. I think there's like 6 or 7.
7 languages.
Yeah, 7 languages. There's a lot moving on. So let's start here. With so many products and categories, what are some of the initial things that you do to ensure easy crawling and low crawl depths? Because I asked this because I just audited a site where literally they had pages that were like 30 clicks below the homepage. And it's not...
Oh, that hurts my soul.
Yeah, it's not nearly as big of a site as Arrow.com. So let's start there. With such a large site, how do you deal with click depth and not getting things to like 30 clicks below the homepage?
My technical SEO mantra is visibility, diagnostics, improvements. So that's what I'd advocate for. Visibility. Make all of the GSC properties. I personally have one for each language, and then for each major section below the language. So the German language version of the site and the products, the Korean version of the site and the categories. Yeah. There is a property set up for each so I can dive in and hone in on what's going wrong. I then use property sets to go ahead and join together all the products across languages, all the categories across languages. This way I can focus in.
And to clarify for the listeners, you're talking about actually registering the domain.com/subfolder, right?
Absolutely.
As a property.
Yes.
That's a little hack. I've mentioned it a bunch of times, but I know it still goes over the radar of some people because it's useful, but you don't think of it as doing that.
It's a lifesaver on large sites.
Yeah. Do you use property sets?
Yes. That's how I join all the products together, all the categories together. So I can go ahead and observe, is this a code issue that is affecting all products, or is this behavior that's only seen within this language and these products?
And so this is a great way to set up diagnosing visibility like you talked about. Mm-hmm. Are there any sort of best practices that you employ to make sure that the click depth is low, that all this content is visible?
I use my sitemaps as diagnostic tools. I try and segment them in meaningful ways. For Arrow, this meant grouping the children of our product sitemap index by the product listing page they appear on. When we see a low index coverage, we know the category, subcategory, and PLP of the products affected, and we can hone in on that pathway.
So are you talking about
how they interact?
XML sitemap or HTML sitemap?
XML.
And so concretely, to use as a diagnostic tool, does this mean you're then submitting those to the different properties and then looking at errors and looking at pages indexed versus not indexed? How are you finding where there's the low index coverage?
I'm using the Google Search Console beta. They have a fantastic new report in there called Index Coverage. And with the chart, it's a stacked bar chart, and it'll tell you this many have errors, this many were valid with warnings, these were valid, and these were excluded. And if you click into any of those, you can get a sample of the pages impacted. Well, now you have a way of connecting the dots. What is the common trait between these pages? And now we can move across our properties and see at a high level and then honing in. So if I look at a high level and I see all of my errors are within one language, I can move to that property and get more specific and then dive down a little bit further.
Internal to the site, so the actual site and not the XML sitemaps, is there anything that you do there to try to bring, like, let's say products, for example, up higher in the click path or subcategories? What can users be thinking about there?
You want to get users to products within 3 clicks to the homepage.
How many clicks? 3?
Within 3 clicks to the homepage.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So how do you do that on a site with, we're 4 million products, right? So how do you do that?
This is the goal we're working on right now. So when you work in enterprise, you don't always have what you want immediately because this is a large machine and you need to address each piece very intentionally. We've done proof of concepts where we've created links to products from these higher level pages from categories and subcategories, tested out with links versus images. So with the POC there now, we can move towards doing a front end re-architecture and incorporating that into the new design. So do we need a subcat? What use does that provide to a user when we could just simply give them products at that stage and the ability to filter down farther?
Yeah. One thing I'm doing on the site I mentioned is a big giant content site. It's not e-com, but it's content. I think this site has about 12 categories right now for like 5,000 posts or something. And so I went and did the math. Yeah, I went and did the math and I said, you know what? We probably need about 70 to 100 or more categories to get everything like up back close to the homepage and have it to be easy to navigate. And an example out there for all the listeners, I really like what HBR does, Harvard Business Review. If you go to their all categories or all topics page, it's literally a HTML page with like just a link to 100 like categories on it that you can easily just get to. So now every single article is, like you just said, 2 or 3 clicks away from the homepage. It's great. So that's what we're trying to do in that case. Now, in regards to indexation for such a large site, 4 million products, do you think about trying to control how many product pages are indexed, how many URLs are indexed, and what's maybe an idea of how you strategically go about controlling that?
We absolutely have to control that. When you have this many products, you don't have a guarantee that each of them is going to provide critical, valuable information like images, product specs, a description. If they're missing those facets, they're going to get a no index tag. It is better for us to think systemically about how we approach this and make those improvements rather than trying to deal with one-offs constantly.
So you actually will no index products.
Correct.
Most people hearing that might think that sounds crazy because this is something you're trying to sell, right? So go a little deeper into the criteria of that. Is this products that just, there's not enough information or there's no search volume? What's the criteria for deciding to index a product?
If the product doesn't have enough information, we set the 5 critical markers. If it's missing, I think 3 of those, it gets the no index tag. If it does not have a translation for that language yet, it uses a no index tag. And this is systemic logic that does it.
And what do you mean by, sorry to interrupt, but what do you mean by critical marker? Is that like a type of data point or what is that?
Yes, it is a type of data point. So does this transistor have the data sheet that provides the information an engineer needs to make a purchasing decision? Does it provide that table of product specs? Does it provide a description of it? Does it provide the image? I cannot remember the other factors right now. But for our audience of engineers, we've identified those are the pieces they need to make purchasing decisions.
That's a really key point, is you actually went with what the audience needs to make that purchase decision. I really like that answer. So I'm going to interject for a moment with our sponsor, BuzzSumo. But actually, this sponsor spot comes from a tweet, what I'm going to tell you about BuzzSumo today. So about a week ago, Tom Critchlow on Twitter, he's been on the show before, I'll link to it in the show notes, He posted a tweet. It said, do any of the SEO tools out there track number of new pages per month for sites? He says he found himself scraping sites often, speaking of scraping sites, for this kind of competitive intelligence. And he's thought it would be handy to have a tool to actually do this for him. A bunch of people replied. Nobody actually had a great answer for this. And I said, you know what? I remember BuzzSumo has a content analyzer. And if you plug in a domain name into that, and I tweeted the chart, I'll put it in the show notes, but basically I put a site into BuzzSumo's content analyzer, and you get this great graph of the last 12 months and the exact number of articles that have been published on that site over that time period. Now, this is only for articles. It's not new product pages or just non-article pages. So I believe they're probably using an RSS reader to pick this up. But Tom wrote right back, and he said, this is a great recommendation. I didn't know this tool did that, and I think it's everything I need. And then a bunch of other people wrote back. In fact, Ollie Sharman said, I'm a big fan of BuzzSumo, and he uses it often to get that kind of research for competitive intelligence and things like that. So I want to point that out because, it seems like some of these tools, BuzzSumo has so much in there that some of this gets a little buried and unnoticed. But if you go to their content analyzer and plug in any domain name, you will get this intelligence. And as far as I know, it is the only tool that does that. And if you'd like a discount, the only place they give a discount on BuzzSumo is here on this podcast, I think, is 30% off 3 months. You can use the discount code DANSHURE, DANSHURE, at buzzsumo.com. That sounds like a cool tool, doesn't it?
Sounds like a great tool.
Yeah, probably more.
Anywhere you can automate eyes on a site.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. So let's jump right back in with another Twitter question from Carolyn Fogg. She wants to know, how do you prove with data that a site architecture needs to be reorganized?
User studies, get that qualitative data out. So we have quantitative, we know how many people hit the site. Qualitative, just going to focus more on how they interact with it and how the human behind that screen feels about it. There's great heat mapping tools out there. You can bring that user group into your business and watch them interact with your site. Alternatively, if you're really brave, find the guy with the biggest title and bet him $20 to find a product using only category navigation.
I like that tip. That does work sometimes. So it sounds like the convincing maybe Arrow or with other companies to reorganize site architecture is easier with UX arguments and user arguments versus like, hey, because like I go to clients and I'm like, hey, you need to reorganize your architecture because of Google, SEO, rankings, like etc. But it sounds like actually using UX is a stronger argument. Absolutely.
Google isn't trying to think like a bot anymore. Google thinks like a human. It's learning every day how to put pieces into context with voice searches now. It's mapping your inflection and learning how the words relate together in sentences. It grows exponentially. So think like a human. Googlebot is trying to think like a human.
I like that. So before we get to some crawling stuff, do you worry about the accessibility and indexing of the faceted nav? I noticed on Arrow, there's a really it's really well done, detailed faceted nav. I've noticed this on like a site like McMaster Car, for example. They must sell as many products as you sell for like hardware and stuff. So how do you think about the strategy behind that? Do you try to control what's accessible and crawlable and indexable from the faceted nav?
Absolutely, because as I learned with that tricky little is active box, if you don't pull that back, you're wasting a lot of crawl budget in an area that you don't necessarily need to and could be causing other issues. So check that canonical, check the pagination. If you see a category plus a filter becomes a high demand, observe that and make that an intentional landing page. So take that out, curate it, and now it's something the user can readily interact with, and you provided content and value there that's unique to it rather than just relying on category plus filter.
Is the decision to use parameters versus creating a unique URL, is that the same as deciding, for you anyways, what gets indexed? Because oftentimes I'll look at it and I'll just try to be simple and say, okay, let's make the pages we want indexed unique URLs. The ones that are sorting and filtering, we'll use parameters. it's sort of a nice cut and dry way to do it. Maybe that's
exactly.
easier. Yeah. Is that how you think about it too?
I do, because then it's easy for you to follow.
Right.
As a tech SEO, looking at a lot of pages, if it's meant to be a URL, make it a proper URL. If it's a variation of another, let it be that parameter. I think it's a great way of approaching it.
Do you use the tool in Search Console to configure parameter crawling?
I do.
And do you find, does Bing have one? Do you use it for Bing? Do you just do that for Google? I'm laughing because I don't even know.
I can't tell you the last time I logged into Bing Webmaster Tools.
Yeah.
They can't render JavaScript, and this site uses a lot of Ajax. So, and knowing that, I understand there's a technical limitation to how much bang I can get to the buck by interacting with Bing right now.
Yeah.
And once we come to a place where we perhaps can deliver to fully parsed HTML on that initial page download, then it can become viable to work more with Bing. But I'm going to have more ROI for effort with focusing on Googlebot.
With Google, yeah, I think that was the question. Is it for Arrow or maybe other people, does it even matter to focus on Bing and the crawling? It sounds like that might not be the case for Arrow.
I think it would depend on your market and your audience. I know some sites who are like, yeah, we get like 30% of our traffic from Bing. Apparently, it's very big for 35 to 50-year-old females who are looking for shopping. So if your business is in that niche, it's all customized to who your users are and what experience you're providing. Yeah,
my client I had for a while that sells and restores big, expensive grand pianos, actually their conversion rate was amazing on Bing, and I did some crawl optimization for Bing, and it seemed to, as we spoke earlier, anecdotally at least, gave them a little bump in there, and then that helped their overall sales. So let's talk more about crawling. So Algorithmics on Twitter, he wants to know, how do you manage 10 million plus URLs for crawling? And I think what he means is your internal crawling to analyze the site. So do you use like a piece of software, a virtual crawler with AWS? How do you manage all of the crawling, all the URLs for your own internal analysis?
I use Screaming Frog on a hefty virtual machine. I really find that you need a full site crawl. Ultimately, you want to configure your crawl to hone in on your goal. Having a lot of data is great, but having data that is focused with an intent gives you actionable results. So exclude unnecessary URLs and parameters. If your pages don't require external or subdomain resources, don't crawl them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I find myself, starting to set up a full crawl, and then you sit there and you're like, oh my goodness, this is going to take a day. And I'm going to have more data than I know what to do with. So then I start playing with all the excludes and includes and trying to set it up that way. I think that makes a lot of sense. So
I'll do a sample crawl on the site, and then from there I'll look at use cases and configure crawls specifically for those use cases.
Right, and I think we might chat.
Strategy.
Yeah, we might chat a little bit more about those use cases in a few moments. Rory Truesdale wants to know, and I think this touches a little bit upon the last question as well, so hopefully I don't repeat the question here, but how do you structure your crawls on the large site? So maybe this does dive a little deeper. So are you for these focus crawls, are you saying, I'm going to crawl categories? Do you crawl just products? What are these specific examples of how you crawl? And then is there a schedule to your crawling? Are you setting this up once a week or once a month, or certain things are custom? So two-part question, what sections and what schedule?
It's going to depend on the business initiatives going on at the time. So I'm running, I think, 3 crawls right now. And it depends on what our business goal is. What initiative, what change to software is going out, or to how we serve our site is going out, finding what we need to measure within that. I wouldn't say they're scheduled, but I'd say that we are a constant integration, constant delivery style of business. And that means there's always something to keep checking and seeing how the site's evolving.
I mean, you say a virtual machine, just for me, because I'm not as savvy in this area. So do you what is that exactly, a virtual machine?
So our team has cloud servers, and they've spun me up. I believe this is what version of Windows are you? I can't remember the top of my head, but it's a Windows virtual server.
Ah, got it.
So that's where I can run it. They have the ability to go ahead and, I need to do a very large crawl, guys. I need you to go ahead and upgrade the RAM in here. So instead of someone going to a physical box and adding another slot in there, they're able to just change a configuration and move very quickly to what we need.
So you gave a great presentation called How to Train Your Bot. I saw the slides. They're wonderful. I want to ask a couple questions off of that presentation. Well, we talked about this earlier, actually, so I'm going to skip this question where I say the URL and getting it back. We talked about that. Redirect chains. You mentioned this a tiny bit earlier, I think. How do you go about finding redirect chains? Why are these a problem? How do we go about fixing them? So redirect chains, go.
Ultimately, it's a bad user experience. Every time it has to go through another redirect, it's going to slow down how quickly that site loads. And especially in our mobile age, we don't have a lot of time to get users the content they're asking for before they'll go somewhere else. Googlebot will follow up to 5 server-side redirects.
Yeah. Now that was interesting to me. Where does that number must come from Google somewhere?
That number comes from Twitter and a conversation with that John Mueller.
Wow. Because I've landed on sites and I hit a redirect and there's like 8. And so,
yes.
So basically Googlebot's not even going to follow that number.
Yeah. It's going to give up.
Wow.
And if you've got a site that's been around for a long time and you've changed URLs a lot, URL A became B, and then B became C, and C became D. Well, if A was never updated, that record doesn't go to D. We're creating a bad user experience, and we're likely limiting Googlebot's understanding of that page in its previous forms and associating it to the new form.
One thing I've wondered lately is I catch myself sometimes slightly doubting things as I'm thinking through them is I've often wondered if, conversely to that, let's say you have the chain set up, does that give Google a better understanding of, okay, A was this, then it was B, then it was C, then it was D. Do you think there's maybe a chain of understanding of the context of that URL that's lost, or you're shaking your head? So probably not. So maybe there's just a little doubt that's creeping up.
I ask for 1-to-1 on my redirects. You don't get to control most of the web. You can control your own internal. And anytime we can make clear technical signals, Googlebot is more likely to understand those.
Yeah.
When we have a clean 1-to-1 matching, they get that this is now that. When we confuse them by sending them through chains and ending up at a 404, we're losing.
Yeah. And so how do you find redirect chains?
That's a good place to go ahead and stick the bot out.
Yeah.
So you can go ahead and do your large scale crawl. If you're using Screaming Frog, make sure you go into that configuration and check for it to always follow redirects. Set that number real high for the number of chains it can go through.
I think that's...
Look at your back and look at your back. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, there's a slight delay on Skype. That's the crawl depth number, I think, right? When you said set that number high?
No, it's not crawl depth. It's the number of redirects that Screaming Frog is allowed to follow. That is the configuration under the Spider Advanced tab. Ah,
right. Okay. Because you want to make sure they follow all the internal redirect chains they find. And then they have a report you can export, I believe.
Yes. Ready-made report.
Now,
also check your backend systems. Mm-hmm. So if you have IIS redirects and your CMS has redirects, pull both sets of those out. Take those lists and crawl the source URLs and see if it lands on the target in that record.
Yeah. By the way, I have a post from 3 or so years ago that's all about finding and fixing redirect chains. I'll link to that in the show notes so you can visually see some of this stuff too. Let's talk a little bit more about indexation. These have all sort of blended together, but I've got my notes here, indexation. So Phil Suter on Twitter, he wants to know, how do you decide which SERPs of a site with keyword search and filter, for example, classified site, should be indexed? All exclude some with no index. I know we talked about this a little bit on products, but maybe there's a general sort of consensus for this here. So how do you, should all pages that you want to be indexed be linked to from somewhere? How do you think about that?
Oh yeah, you never want to have an island. That needs to interlink. If you have an island page, there's no way for a human to get to that and to provide meaningful context in your interlinking. Googlebot really wants a well-informed answer and resources that relate to that. If we look at the search quality ranking guidelines, they break it down into main and supplementary content. The supplementary content are those internal links, and they can be external, but that are related to that topic.
Yep.
So if you have a one-page answer that's not well-informed, it probably won't perform well.
Yeah. I've been beating the drum on that entire thing for like a year, and I still find it's not quite common knowledge yet, just this idea of having a topically related linking structure for the landing page you land on, because Google wants to send user to the page that not only is going to answer that question, but then they can dig deeper and find the next answer.
If you and I have a well-informed conversation about Star Wars, since it's May the 4th, we're probably going to talk about Sith and Wookiees and Ewoks and the Force, just because it's a naturally well-informed conversation.
Yes.
And those kind of inner links are what Googlebot's looking for as well when they want to find something with expertise, authority, and trust.
Bill Scully on Twitter wants to know what tool, this is a great question. You replied on Twitter. What tool do you use to check to see that the pages are indexed, especially for a huge site?
This is a tricky one. And what I do is I build custom sitemaps and submit them with the specific pages I'm looking for.
Right. So that goes back to your answer earlier. So I know a few people out there, I'm not going to name any names, somebody that's been on this show before, his name rhymes with the word skill, let's say. He built an indexation checker, a bulk indexation checker. Google did not like that. The next day, Gary Ish tweeted something, or John tweeted something about, by the way, terms of service, etc. But if you can figure out who I'm talking about, this tool might be out there. And by the way, I know John Mueller listens to this show sometimes, so I'm sorry, John, I just mentioned that, but oh well. But that's a great tip, submitting your individual sitemaps. Okay, let's jump to log file analysis. So I know you do this there at arrow.com. What tools do you use for log files?
I am looking at Sumo Logic, which takes our logs from across the servers and puts them in one place for an easy access.
And is that a cloud-based?
Good log. Sorry?
Is that cloud-based?
Yes. And we also have Akamai. So Akamai is the tool we use as part of our bot mitigation. And if something is blocked, that action is going to happen before it comes to where Sumo Logic can log it. So you need those two pieces in tandem.
Oh, so it's going to sort of filter the data for you in a way?
Yes. So if a trigger stepped in and said, I'm going to stop this user, that user never made it to an experience in the site that would create a log, an element in the log.
Right. So just for the listeners, if you don't have the budget to use what sounds like probably a really, nice but probably pricey program, or maybe not, correct me if I'm wrong, Sumo Logic, I use the Screaming Frog log analyzer.
Yeah.
It's desktop, great price, really fantastic log analyzer, especially if you're not on such a large site. I've had clients email me, a log file zipped that's like 10 gigabytes or 20 gigabytes, and I open it fine here on my external drive. And the reason I mention it is you can filter out spoofed bots.
Yes. It is a great tool. I actually got access to Sumo Logic because I was bugging the DevOps teams to let me use the Screaming Frog tool, and they're like, it does the same thing as this. Here's your login. So
wow.
Talking to your team and asking, get you far.
That's great. So when you analyze log files, what things are you looking for, and what sort of actions or improvements might come from analyzing the logs?
I am frequently looking for changes in response codes. So a sudden spike in 500 errors might mean the latest code push had some unintended consequences. Breaking it down by the content type or the language. So seeing, is Googlebot readily interacting with the German versions of these PDPs, or something blocking them from really getting over to this content that we've just created? Do we accidentally make an island? How do we create a crawl path that lets them interact with that? I also check for the three primary behaviors. Are they checking back in on content that's indexed? Are they following external links to find content or interact with that? And you do that by checking the refer in the logs. Or are they discovering new content internally? So you'll have an internal refer.
On the following external links, do you mean you're checking to see if they're following the links where you're linking outside of arrow.com?
So if someone linked to arrow.com, and I've identified this line in my file is from Googlebot, I'm going to look at the referring domain and path to see how they landed on my internal element. And that gives me a good idea of, okay, we've got, this great new piece of content came out and Googlebot's discovering it from these really authoritative sites. So this is going to do well for that. And then communicating with our content team about how that interaction is going.
Let's go back to checking to see if content is indexed and yes. being tended to. Is there a certain frequency of crawling that you look for a product or category when it comes to making sure Google is coming back and revisiting that URL?
I don't think I'm necessarily looking at frequency for individual pages. I stay at a very high level of the overall site health when it comes to the optimization. What are we focusing on now with the seasonality? That's more of our content team. They will ask me specific questions of, hey, how is Googlebot crawling this section or whatever piece? And I can provide that data to them. This is where it becomes a collaboration. I'm pivoting and working with a lot of tools, and I have to admit my own limitations. These guys are great at curating that optimized content. I can't even remember what some of my tools do some days because I've pivoted 23 times in 17 meetings.
So let's chat a little bit about mobile. One question on mobile. So we know we've got the mobile first index coming up. What steps, if any, has Arrow taken to ensure that you're ready for the mobile first index?
We had a big talk about the mobile first index, and we are working towards a front-end re-architecture that provides the elements seen on a mobile device first. So those are prioritized within their load. We're looking to have a site that works with the Rails methodology. So we want to have that first meaningful paint very quickly. We want to get them to a first interactive very quickly. We care about what the user can see and interact with above the fold more than we do a full page load.
Interesting. So break down a little bit like the rendering above the fold, the first paint, etc. For some of the people listening, like how can they maybe diagnose that these things are not working correctly in that context?
There is great documentation from Google in the Developers Hub. I know that sounds a little intimidating for people who don't work with developers, but the resources you can find there, and the URL is at developers.google.com, gives you things like user-centric performance metrics. So instead of focusing on, well, how long did the page take to load? Ultimately, a user doesn't care about what they can't see and interact with yet. So let's get them to that first meaningful engagement with your site. And it breaks it down with, is it happening? Is it useful? Is it usable? And is it delightful? They provide within here metrics that you can add to your site to record those.
Oh, cool.
If you haven't started using Lighthouse yet, that is Google's recommended tool for the mobile first index. And the Lighthouse audits provide you with these pieces like time to first meaningful paint.
I'm going to link to all of those in the show notes, by the way, at evolvingseo.com/wire. So I'll make sure I get those links or dig up those resources. Do you feel like you're going to be ready for mobile first index?
Google has really said that they are rolling it out slowly and intentionally. And there's been a lot of questions for sites that are involved heavily with B2B. So with engineers, these are people who are working with technology. They are primarily working on desktop.
Right.
I think that provides us some grace.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Am I going to stop advocating the urgency? No, because the next billion users are mobile.
Right.
Arrow is a company that wants to increase its global e-commerce presence. And to do that, we need to meet the users' needs in these countries. If you are trying to reach an audience in Singapore, 91% of those interactions are from a mobile device.
Yep, exactly. It's important to think about when it comes to the global market. Let's chat a little bit about Angular and JavaScript rendering. When we chatted before in our pre-interview, you mentioned Angular Universal and Sitecore Headless. And I kind of jotted them down, but I'd love to know a little bit more about what are those two platforms, actually.
So Angular Universal is a version of AngularJS that is a front-end framework that is JavaScript-based. I particularly love Universal because, like we talked about earlier with Bing, Bing can't interact with JavaScript. It can't crawl those links, see those images. But what Universal does is it gives you fully parsed HTML. So yes. Every link is available, every image. You still got to worry because I think Bing only acknowledges the first so many bytes of a page before it's like, I think I know what the page is about.
Yeah. And by the way, Bing, don't take your time fixing your search engine, because I use Bing to diagnose things sometimes. I'm like, okay, does it work on Google or does it work on Bing, right? So you can use Bing as a diagnostic tool. So Bing,
yes.
Take your
and
time.
they have the subfolder breakdown of your site, which I really enjoy.
Who does, Bing?
Bing, yeah. You can explore your own site and it gives you the subfolders that it's discovered, and you can dive further into each portion of content.
Wait, how do you get to that? You just search your site in Bing, maybe?
You have to go to Bing Webmaster Tools.
Oh, it's in Webmaster Tools.
Yeah. So when you first move into a new site, I really like to do that because sometimes there's whole subfolders and content that you never knew existed.
Right.
And now you've got visibility. Google doesn't provide that tool. Hey, John, can we have a tool like that?
Yeah. John, if you're listening. Also, so you talked about Angular Universal and then Sitecore Headless. Is that the thing that does the fully rendered HTML, or what is that exactly?
So Sitecore is a CMS. It's your content management system. A headless Sitecore is available in version 9. And that means you have a backend only content management system that makes content accessible via RESTful API and can display on any device. So the content is pushed usually in JSON, very small file, into the template you've made. Angular is ultimately a plug and play. What is the value for a header? It populates each piece of that. The JSON being so lightweight and small lets you update these pages very, very quickly.
So when I think about an SEO consultant, or maybe somebody starting in-house in a company, like as an SEO, when we come along and as a consultant, sometimes I'm not familiar with all the variety of platforms people are using. I don't know all these nuances, like this one's HTML rendered, this one's not. So as SEOs, how do we check to make sure that this content's accessible? And this is something I've chatted about with on some other shows, but I'd like to get your viewpoint on this. How do you ensure that this content is accessible?
If you are working on a site pre-launch, I'm going to give a big shout out to Screaming Frog here. They answered my prayers with, I think it was version 6, Render Rooney, and that gave you the ability to execute the JavaScript.
Oh, wow.
So now we're in version 9 now. You can store the fully rendered HTML. So the only tool available from Google right now that lets you see the DOM as Google does is the Rich Results tool. It may not have a test yet for the markup you're searching, but if you ever want to see the rendered DOM as Googlebot does, check out that tool. Screaming Frog, I can grab screenshots. I can grab the fully rendered HTML. And what I'm looking for to make sure it's understood is blocked resources. So if it can't access the CSS or JavaScript that's needed to render the page, it's not going to get to that content. Also, is my content available on the initial page load? If it only is available on click, that's not going to be there for the bots to discover.
Right. Yeah. So, and you have a sentence here in the notes that says, I'm just going to read it because I have a question about picking it apart. Since viewing a new page might not mean a new page load, like you just mentioned, use history API push state to update the visible URL in the browser to match the content displayed. So can you break that apart a little bit? What does that mean exactly?
Absolutely. So if you're running a JavaScript framework single page application, it is not reloading the page. It's simply changing the content that's within that initial page load via that JSON. So in order to keep track of your content, to keep a URL associated to the resource, you use a Mozilla protocol called the History API Push State. And that will update the URL to reflect the content as it's changed. You want to use the canonical versions in your sitemaps. I cite a lovely link back to a blog I wrote for a great agency here in Denver called Volume 9. It's what SEOs need to know about Angular sites. Disclosure, your cache page is going to look terrifying. Don't panic.
Okay. I always wondered about that because I worked with a client a little while ago that their cache page showed their 404 template, but everything else looked fine. Like the page was ranking, the internal render and Search Console was fine. Like
that's the key, fetch and render. If you can fetch and render and it's all available, you are good.
Okay. So that's sort of the final result. Got it. Okay. Let's chat about SEO horror stories. So we had a fun question from, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce your handle correctly, maybe Vitaminute. What's your stab at that, Jamie? I'm not exactly sure. But anyways, she wants to know, can you share one of your worst SEO nightmare moments experienced while working on an e-commerce site with millions of multilingual pages? So any horror stories?
I am a horror movie fanatic, so I like anything that has to do with horror. The biggest challenge, and honestly, this one kind of scared me because I was having to approach it and I was kind of worried I was going to start a Gangs of New York thing with multiple teams because we had iframes in the head of our site. And they were from 2 different teams and they were there for very, very good reasons. The teams needed these data points. Mm-hmm. I needed them gone. When Googlebot encounters an iframe in the head as part of HTML5 protocol, it automatically closes the head.
Really?
And that means it does not see the information that comes after. Now, in my case, it was hreflang tags. In a massive site, I had 58 hreflang tags acknowledged.
Wow. This might be maybe a dumb question. What was an iframe doing in the head of the HTML? And as I heard myself ask that question, I'm also thinking like, that's only a question that an SEO would be asking, but.
Right. So
did it serve some kind of purpose or yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They both serve purposes. One was for a paid traffic thing. And the other one was part of how we observed overall page performance. So it was necessary for our logs and our health check monitoring. So asking either team to remove those meant potentially either being in the dark to how the site was behaving in the wild or impacting an entire acquisition channel's revenue. Had to spend a lot of time working with my teammates, finding documentation, hounding people until I finally found a way to get one out of the head and have it still be effective, and then to anchor the other one so that it would always appear after my critical metadata. So once this fix went out, we jumped from 58 hreflang tags to 110,000 in a week.
Wow. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to ask a little bit about your speaking, actually, because you're on this show because you tweeted something a little while ago that you're available to speak as an SEO with all of this experience. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, what triggered that tweet for you? Like, did something lead up to that? Was it a single moment, or maybe what held you back from putting it out there that you're available and interested in speaking? And I'm also wondering after that, like, what came of that tweet? Because I've went back and looked and you've got hundreds of likes, lots of retweets. Did it do a lot better than you expected? So let's jump into that. What triggered that? And then what's happened?
I was blown away at the response of that one.
Yeah.
So I was in Hawaii enjoying a lovely vacation with my partner, about to go snorkeling, and just thinking to myself, I do a lot of my best work when it comes to optimization, not staring at a computer, just thinking about these really beautiful, complex problems. And I just decided to put it out there. I was like, hey, let's be brave. You know, we just swam with sharks. We can do this.
So do you think it was sort of being out of your normal day-to-day work, and this sounds like something you just sort of put out on a whim? Was it something you had been thinking about a lot of leading up to that? And I actually want to read...
we have lag again.
Yeah, I realize I want to read the tweet so people know what I'm talking about. Your tweet says, putting it out into the universe. If you're looking for female speakers, I'm a technical SEO who works on a 6 million product e-commerce site in 7 languages. I like this. And I'm damn good. I like the little, and I'm damn good with the wink at the end there. So, and it 251 retweets, 773 likes, even more than the last time I looked at it. So yeah, were you thinking about this leading up to that tweet?
I had wanted to challenge myself to be out there and speak more. I think when you're in-house, you're constantly running to the next thing. You know, we are CI/CD, constant integration, constant deployment. You don't get a lot of time to take a step back and do things like those case studies and get out there and interact with the community. And I've been so thankful to have the search community that I do, people who will step up and go, hey, here's a resource, or did you look at this way? And thought, you know what, let's go ahead and put that as a personal challenge. I'm just feeling like, all right, let's do it.
And what's happened since then? You've booked, I think, at least one speaking engagement?
Yeah, I'm going to be at Brighton SEO in September. Fingers crossed, Tech Boost, the first technical SEO conference. Last year was the first year. It was out in Boston. If you have not seen it, you should go check it out.
Yeah, that's actually a shout out to Paul Shapiro, who was on this show.
Yes.
And I'm Boston's neighbor. I'm in Worcester, Mass. So I was kicking myself for not going to the first one, but I'm making a promise to hopefully get to the second one to see that. And then, sorry, continue. Where else?
They've put out an offer there, so they're right. Like, give us a pitch. Let's see what you got. So I'm excited for that challenge. Being at a tech dedicated SEO conference was fantastic. People are up there doing these really rapid presentations, and here's my Python script. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
So we got to learn a lot from that. Paul is a fantastic person to follow on Twitter if you don't already, guys out there in the audience.
Great. So to wrap things up, where can people find you online? And then you mentioned you're going to be at Brighton SEO. Is there any other events you're going to be at in person, just attending or speaking as well in the real world? So online and real world.
If you were at Google I/O next week, please come say hi. I am the blue-haired one. Actually, that doesn't work so well at I/O. I was there last year, and there's a lot of us.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Very bright colors out there.
Yeah.
Going to be at I/O, and then I don't know, I'm talking to a bunch of people on figuring out next steps and where to go. I'm lucky to have a team that's really supportive of me stepping out and being part of the community, and hopefully offering some good insights. Guys, please forgive me for the silly things I've said that probably weren't right, because I'm human, but I appreciate you all listening.
And where can people find you online? Twitter, LinkedIn, website, etc.
Best way to reach me is on Twitter. I am jammer_volts.
Where does that handle come from, by the way?
My husband and I had a steampunk style prop shop for a while, and his handle was Professor Volts, and I was Jammer. I'm just kind of stuck.
I like it. Great. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us on Experts in the Wire, and we will talk to everyone next time.
Thank you.